By dawn on the second day, the investigation had transformed into one of the most comprehensive security operations in recent royal protection history. The evidence recovered from the palace grounds painted a picture of a surveillance operation so sophisticated and well-planned that it sent shock waves through every level of British security services. Agent Rebecca Foster had spent the night coordinating between MI5, Scotland Yard, and the government communications headquarters, trying to piece together who was behind the operation and what their ultimate goal might have been. The morning brought new revelations that would prove even more disturbing than the initial discoveries. The technical analysis of the surveillance equipment found hidden around Kensington Palace revealed manufacturing details that pointed to devices not available through commercial channels. These were professional-grade intelligence-gathering tools, the kind typically used by government agencies or highly sophisticated criminal organizations. Dr. Martin Webb, MI5's senior technical analyst, arrived at 6:30 a.m. with a preliminary report that would change the entire direction of the investigation. Agent Foster, Dr. Webb began, setting up his laptop in the secure communications room. The devices we recovered last night are manufactured by a company called Advanced Surveillance Solutions. This company doesn't sell to the general public. Their client list is restricted to government intelligence agencies and a very small number of approved private security firms. What does that tell us about who we're dealing with? Foster asked. Either we're looking at a rogue intelligence operation, or someone with very high-level connections has provided equipment to unauthorized parties. In either case, this suggests resources and access that go far beyond typical criminal activity. As Dr. Webb continued his technical briefing, Princess Charlotte was waking up in the secure quarters where she had spent the night. Despite the unusual circumstances, she had slept peacefully, protected by a constant security presence and the knowledge that the adults around her were working to keep her family safe. Detective Sergeant Mitchell had remained on duty throughout the night, and she was the first person Charlotte saw when she woke up. "Good morning, Your Royal Highness," Sarah said with a warm smile. "How did you sleep?" "Very well, thank you, Miss Sarah. Have you learned anything more about the man in the garden?" "We've learned quite a lot, actually, and it's all because of your careful observations. The investigators are very impressed with how much you noticed and how accurately you remembered the details." Charlotte sat up in bed, her expression serious for someone so young. "Was he really trying to hurt my family?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "We're still investigating exactly what his intentions were, but thanks to you noticing that something wasn't right, we've been able to take steps to make sure your family stays safe." Meanwhile, the broader investigation was revealing connections that extended far beyond a single suspicious individual. The analysis of the surveillance equipment had led to a review of recent intelligence reports, and what emerged was a pattern of unusual activity that had been developing for months. Agent Foster received a secure communication from MI5 headquarters that changed everything. Intelligence analysts had identified similar surveillance equipment being used in operations targeting other high-profile British families, including several members of Parliament and senior military officials. "Agent Foster, this is Director Wellington. We need you to understand that what you've uncovered at Kensington Palace appears to be part of a much larger operation. We're dealing with a systematic intelligence gathering campaign that may be targeting multiple high-value British nationals." The implications were staggering. If Charlotte's observation had uncovered just one part of a broader intelligence operation, then the security of numerous prominent British families and officials might be compromised. Foster immediately expanded her investigation team and began coordinating with other ongoing security reviews. What she discovered was a pattern of sophisticated surveillance that had been carefully designed to avoid detection by traditional security measures. The breakthrough came at 10:30 a.m. when analysts reviewing traffic camera footage from the past month identified the registration numbers of both vehicles that Charlotte had observed near the palace grounds. The white van was registered to a legitimate landscaping company, but further investigation revealed that it had been reported stolen 3 weeks earlier. The blue van proved even more interesting. It was registered to a private investigation firm that, upon closer examination, appeared to exist only on paper. The address listed for the company was a vacant office building, and the phone numbers led to disconnected lines. Detective Chief Inspector Thornton coordinated the vehicle investigation with Agent Foster's technical analysis, and together they began to construct a timeline of the surveillance operation that was far more extensive than anyone had initially imagined. Agent Foster, Thornton said during their morning briefing, "We've identified at least 12 separate occasions over the past 6 weeks when these vehicles were in the vicinity of royal residences, government buildings, or the private homes of senior officials." What's the pattern? They appear to have been conducting systematic surveillance of multiple targets, gathering intelligence on daily routines, security procedures, and building layouts. The operation at Kensington Palace wasn't isolated. It was part of a comprehensive intelligence-gathering campaign. As the investigation expanded, Charlotte's parents, the Prince and Princess of Wales, were informed of the full scope of what their daughter's observation had uncovered. The briefing took place in a secure room at the palace, with Agent Foster providing a comprehensive overview of the investigation's findings. "Your Royal Highnesses," Foster began, "Princess Charlotte's observation about the suspicious gardener has led us to uncover what appears to be a sophisticated intelligence operation targeting multiple high-profile British families and officials." The Prince of Wales listened intently as Foster explained the extent of the surveillance equipment that had been discovered and the implications of the broader investigation. "Are you saying that Charlotte noticed something that your security systems missed?" the Princess of Wales asked. "That's exactly what I'm saying, Your Royal Highness." Princess Charlotte's attention to detail and her willingness to report what seemed unusual to her protection officer quite possibly prevented this operation from gathering the intelligence it was designed to collect. The Prince of Wales was quiet for a moment before responding. "What kind of intelligence were they trying to gather?" Foster's expression grew more serious. "Based on the equipment we've recovered and the pattern of surveillance we've identified, they were gathering detailed information about daily routines, security procedures, building layouts, and family schedules. This type of intelligence could be used for any number of purposes, none of them good." The briefing continued with an explanation of the enhanced security measures that would remain in place while the investigation continued, and the steps being taken to identify and apprehend those responsible for the surveillance operation. At noon, a major breakthrough occurred when facial recognition analysis of security camera footage identified one of the individuals involved in the surveillance operation. The man matched Charlotte's description of the suspicious gardener, and his identity opened up an entirely new dimension to the investigation. The individual was identified as Marcus Thompson, a former British military intelligence officer who had been discharged from service 2 years earlier under circumstances that were still classified. His background included extensive training in surveillance techniques, electronic intelligence gathering, and covert operations. Agent Foster, Director Wellington said during an urgent secure call, "Marcus Thompson was discharged from military intelligence after allegations of unauthorized contact with foreign intelligence services. We never proved criminal activity, but there were serious concerns about his loyalty." "What kind of foreign contacts?" "That information is classified, but I can tell you that his discharge was related to suspected compromises of sensitive intelligence operations. If he's involved in this surveillance campaign, then we may be dealing with foreign intelligence penetration of British security." The discovery of Thompson's identity triggered an immediate manhunt involving multiple law enforcement agencies. His photograph was distributed to every police force in the United Kingdom, along with details about the vehicles he had been using and known associates from his time in military intelligence. Meanwhile, the technical analysis of the surveillance equipment continued to reveal new information. The devices had been programmed to transmit data to multiple receiving stations, suggesting a sophisticated network designed to gather and distribute intelligence to various parties. Dr. Webb's analysis revealed that some of the transmission frequencies matched those used by foreign intelligence services, while others appeared to be directed toward private networks that investigators were still working to identify. The complexity of this operation suggests coordination between multiple parties, Dr. Webb explained to the investigation team. "We're not dealing with a single individual or even a single organization. This appears to be a network of individuals and groups working together to gather intelligence on high-value British targets." As the day progressed, additional surveillance sites were discovered at other locations around London. The pattern that emerged showed a systematic intelligence gathering operation targeting senior government officials, military leaders, and members of the royal family. Each site showed the same sophisticated planning and execution that had been evident at Kensington Palace. Professional-grade surveillance equipment, detailed knowledge of security procedures, and careful timing to avoid detection. But, in every case, the operation had been conducted without the subjects of the surveillance being aware that they were being monitored. Only Charlotte's sharp observation and her decision to report what she had noticed to her protection officer had exposed the existence of the broader network. At 3 p.m., Agent Foster received word that Marcus Thompson had been located at a safe house in East London. The location had been under surveillance by a different intelligence agency for several months as part of an unrelated investigation, but Thompson's presence there provided the connection that tied several ongoing security concerns together. The decision was made to conduct a coordinated operation to apprehend Thompson and search the safe house for additional evidence. The operation would involve specialist teams from multiple agencies, all coordinated to ensure that maximum intelligence could be gathered while preventing the destruction of evidence. As the operation was being planned, Princess Charlotte was receiving her own briefing from Agent Foster about the day's developments. "Your Royal Highness," Foster said, "I wanted you to know that your observation about the gardener has helped us uncover something very important. We've learned that this person was part of a group that was trying to gather information about several important families, including yours." Charlotte listened carefully, her expression serious, but not frightened. "Did they want to hurt people, or were they just trying to learn about us?" "We're still investigating exactly what they intended to do with the information they were gathering, but the important thing is that because you noticed something unusual and told Miss Sarah about it, we were able to stop them before they could complete whatever they were planning." "Will they be caught?" "We're working very hard to find everyone who was involved, and we're making good progress thanks to the information you provided." As evening approached, the operation to apprehend Marcus Thompson was put into motion. Multiple teams surrounded the safe house, while technical specialists prepared to gather electronic evidence and communications equipment that might reveal the full extent of the surveillance network. The success of the operation would depend on timing, coordination, and the element of surprise. But, regardless of what happened next, everyone involved in the investigation knew that it had all been made possible by an 8-year-old princess who had the wisdom to report something that didn't seem quite right. The arrest operation was scheduled for 6 p.m., and its results would either confirm the scope of the conspiracy that Charlotte's observation had uncovered, or reveal that the situation was even more complex and dangerous than anyone had yet imagined. The emergency response began at exactly 9:47 p.m. when Chief Inspector Hughes made the call that would transform a routine security concern into a full-scale investigation. Within 30 minutes of his decision, Kensington Palace was discreetly swarming with additional security personnel, each one trained to handle threats against the royal family with precision and minimal disruption to the residents. Detective Chief Inspector Margaret Thornton arrived from Scotland Yard's Specialist Protection Command at 10:15 p.m. At 42 years old, she had built her career handling high-profile security investigations, but even she was struck by the unique circumstances of this case. It wasn't often that an 8-year-old royal provided the key observations that potentially uncovered a major security breach. Thornton's first stop was the apartment where Princess Charlotte continued her evening routine under the watchful protection of D.S. Mitchell and 2 additional officers. Despite the increased security presence, Charlotte appeared remarkably composed for someone her age in such circumstances. "Your Royal Highness," Thornton said after being properly introduced, "I understand you've made some very important observations about someone working in the palace gardens. Would you be willing to help us by answering a few more questions?" Charlotte nodded seriously. "Of course." Miss Sarah explained that noticing details is important for keeping everyone safe. Thornton pulled out a tablet computer that contained photographs of all authorized palace staff members. "I'd like you to look through these pictures and tell me if you see the person you observed." Charlotte carefully examined each photograph, taking her time to study the faces and features. After several minutes, she looked up with a definitive expression. "He's not here," she said confidently. "None of these people match the man I saw in the garden." This confirmation sent a chill through everyone in the room. If the person Charlotte had observed wasn't an authorized staff member, then the security implications were far more serious than anyone had initially imagined. Can you tell me more about what made him seem unusual besides the wrong tools and the way he looked at the windows? Thornton asked. Charlotte thought carefully before responding. Well, he moved differently from the other gardeners. When the real gardeners work, they bend down a lot and move around the plants gently. But this man stood up straight most of the time and seemed to be studying the building more than working on the flowers. Did you notice anything about his equipment or tools besides the hedge trimmer? Yes, actually. He had a small bag with him that looked different from the bags the other gardeners usually carry. It was black and square-shaped, and he kept checking something inside it. The real gardeners usually have canvas bags with their hand tools, but his bag looked more like something you'd carry important papers or electronics in. Thornton exchanged a meaningful glance with Hughes. A small black bag containing electronics could indicate surveillance equipment, recording devices, or even more dangerous items. Meanwhile, the physical investigation of the palace grounds was revealing increasingly disturbing evidence. The unauthorized entry point had been located near the service entrance where delivery trucks typically arrived. Someone had clearly studied the security procedures and had chosen their entry point carefully to avoid the main surveillance cameras. Inside the gardening shed, investigators found evidence that authentic palace uniforms had been accessed and temporarily removed. The locks on the uniform storage area showed signs of sophisticated tampering, suggesting someone with advanced knowledge of security systems and lock manipulation. Most concerning of all, a detailed search of the area where Charlotte had observed the suspicious gardener revealed items that had been carefully concealed beneath some landscaping equipment. These items included a high-powered camera with a telephoto lens, detailed floor plans of apartment 1A, and what appeared to be a schedule of the Cambridge family's daily routines. When Thornton received this information via secure communication, she realized they were dealing with something far more serious than a simple trespasser. This was evidence of systematic surveillance and planning that suggested a sophisticated operation targeting the royal family. Princess Charlotte, Thornton said, you mentioned that you saw this person on 2 different days. Can you remember anything else about those occasions? Did you notice if he had any vehicles nearby, or if there were other people with him? Charlotte closed her eyes for a moment, clearly trying to recall specific details. On Tuesday, I remember seeing a white van parked near the service road, but I thought it belonged to the regular gardening crew. Yesterday, there was a different van there, a blue one. And now that I think about it, I did see someone else, but they were much farther away, near the main gates. This information was immediately relayed to the investigation team, who began reviewing security camera footage from the past week. What they discovered was a pattern of surveillance that had apparently been going on much longer than anyone had realized. The security cameras revealed that the white van had appeared on palace grounds 4 times in the past 2 weeks, always during shift changes when new personnel would be less likely to question additional vehicles. The blue van had made 3 appearances, with slightly different timing that suggested someone was studying and adapting to the security routines. More disturbing still was the discovery that the surveillance hadn't been limited to the exterior of the building. When technical specialists examined the area around the windows that the suspicious gardener had been observing, they found evidence of sophisticated listening devices that had been placed with considerable skill and knowledge of the building structure. At 11:30 p.m., Thornton made the decision to contact MI5, the United Kingdom's domestic counterintelligence and security agency. The level of planning and sophistication evident in this operation suggested it might be beyond the scope of ordinary criminal activity. Agent Rebecca Foster from MI5 arrived at Kensington Palace at midnight, bringing with her a team of technical specialists and analysts. Foster was a veteran of numerous counterintelligence investigations, but she was immediately struck by the unique nature of this case. Chief Inspector Thornton, Foster said after being briefed on the situation, this operation shows characteristics of professional surveillance, possibly by a foreign intelligence service or a highly sophisticated criminal organization. The fact that an 8-year-old royal noticed what our security systems missed is both impressive and concerning. Foster's team immediately began a comprehensive technical sweep of the Cambridge family's residence. Using advanced detection equipment, they discovered additional surveillance devices that had been placed with remarkable skill and knowledge of the building's layout. The devices were sophisticated and expensive, far beyond what would typically be used by casual intruders or even ordinary criminals. The placement of the equipment suggested intimate knowledge of the building's electrical systems, ventilation, and structural details that would only be available to someone with access to classified architectural plans. While the technical investigation continued, Foster interviewed Princess Charlotte directly. Despite the late hour and the serious nature of the situation, Charlotte remained alert and cooperative. "Your Royal Highness," Foster began, "you've been tremendously helpful in identifying this situation. I want to ask you about something specific. When you observed this person over the past few days, did you notice if he ever used any small electronic devices? Perhaps something he held up toward the building or pointed at the windows?" Charlotte thought carefully. "Yes, actually. Yesterday morning, I saw him holding something small and black up toward our apartment. At first, I thought it might be a mobile phone, but he held it very still for a long time, and he pointed it specifically at different windows, almost like he was taking pictures of each one." This description matched the pattern Foster had seen in previous cases involving professional surveillance operations. The systematic photographing of different windows would allow someone to map the interior layout of the residence and identify the specific rooms used by family members. "Did you notice anything about the timing of when he was there? Was it always at the same time of day?" "No, that's part of what seemed strange. The real gardeners usually work in the mornings when it's cooler, but this man was there at different times. Tuesday afternoon when we came back from school, Wednesday morning during breakfast, and yesterday he was there in the evening when most of the staff had gone home." Foster realized that Charlotte had identified something crucial. The varied timing suggested someone who was mapping the family's daily routines, identifying when they would be in specific rooms and when security coverage might be lighter. At 1:15 a.m., the technical sweep revealed something that elevated the entire investigation to a new level of urgency. Hidden beneath the window ledge of Charlotte's study room, specialists discovered a sophisticated tracking device that had been designed to monitor conversations and activities within the room. The device was small enough to be easily overlooked, but powerful enough to transmit detailed audio surveillance to receivers located outside the palace grounds. The level of technology and the precision of its placement indicated a level of resources and expertise that was deeply troubling. Foster immediately contacted her superiors at MI5 headquarters. This was no longer just a security breach. It was evidence of a comprehensive intelligence operation targeting one of the most closely guarded families in the United Kingdom. "Agent Foster, what's our assessment of the threat level?" asked Director James Wellington during their secure telephone conversation. "Sir, based on the evidence we've uncovered, this appears to be a sophisticated surveillance operation that has been ongoing for at least 2 weeks. The perpetrators have detailed knowledge of palace security procedures, access to advanced surveillance equipment, and have demonstrated the ability to place monitoring devices within the royal residence itself. What about the family's safety? The Cambridge family appears to have been under comprehensive surveillance, but we haven't found evidence of immediate plans for physical harm. However, the level of intelligence gathering suggests preparation for some kind of operation that we haven't yet identified." Wellington's response was immediate and decisive. "Implement Protocol 7 immediately. Full protective detail for all family members, complete communications security review, and coordinate with Scotland Yard for a comprehensive manhunt." Protocol 7 was MI5's highest level of domestic security response, reserved for threats against senior members of the royal family that showed characteristics of foreign intelligence operations or domestic terrorism. As Foster implemented these measures, Princess Charlotte was finally escorted to a more secure location within the palace, where she would remain under constant protection until the investigation was completed. Despite the lateness of the hour and the serious nature of the situation, she had remained remarkably calm and helpful throughout the evening. "Miss Foster," Charlotte said as she was being moved to the secure area, "I hope noticing these things has helped keep my family safe." "Your Royal Highness," Foster replied. Your observations have quite possibly prevented something very serious from happening. You should be proud of how alert and brave you've been tonight." As the investigation moved into its second day, teams of analysts began the complex process of identifying who had been conducting the surveillance and what their ultimate objectives might have been. The sophistication of the operation suggested resources and planning that could only come from a well-funded and highly professional organization. But even as the investigation expanded to involve multiple agencies and dozens of specialists, everyone involved knew that it had all begun with the sharp eyes and thoughtful observations of an 8-year-old princess who had noticed that something about a gardener didn't seem quite right. The next phase of the investigation would reveal just how much danger Princess Charlotte's family had been in, and how her simple observation had potentially saved them from a carefully planned and highly dangerous operation. Princess Charlotte Elizabeth Diana sat cross-legged on the Persian carpet in her private study room, her mathematics homework spread across the low table before her. The autumn rain drummed steadily against the tall windows of apartment 1A at Kensington Palace, creating a rhythmic soundtrack to her evening routine. At 8 years old, she had already developed the discipline expected of a future member of the working royal family, though she still possessed the natural curiosity and observational skills that often surprised the adults around her. Detective Sergeant Sarah Mitchell stood quietly by the window, her trained eyes scanning the palace grounds as part of her evening security sweep. Sarah had been assigned to Princess Charlotte's protection detail for over 2 years, and in that time, she had grown genuinely fond of the young royal. Unlike some protection officers who maintained strict professional distance, Sarah had developed a warm rapport with Charlotte while never compromising her primary duty of keeping the princess safe. The relationship between them had evolved naturally. Charlotte was an intelligent child who asked thoughtful questions, and Sarah found herself enjoying their conversations during the quieter moments of her shifts. Tonight was no different, except for the strange feeling that had been nagging at Sarah since she arrived for her evening duty at 6 o'clock. "Miss Sarah," Charlotte said without looking up from her worksheet, "do you remember the new gardener who started working here last week?" Sarah turned from the window, her attention immediately focused. In her experience, when Princess Charlotte noticed something, it was usually worth paying attention to. The young royal had an uncanny ability to observe details that others missed, a trait that both impressed and occasionally concerned her security team. "Which gardener are you thinking of, Your Royal Highness?" Sarah asked, moving closer to where Charlotte sat. "The tall man with the beard. He was working on the flower beds near the main entrance yesterday when we came back from school." Charlotte carefully erased a mistake in her arithmetic before continuing. "He was wearing the same green uniform as the other gardeners, but something seemed different about him." This was exactly the kind of observation that made Sarah's job both easier and more challenging. Charlotte's attention to detail was remarkable for someone her age, but it also meant that every comment needed to be taken seriously and investigated thoroughly. "What made him seem different?" Sarah asked, keeping her tone casual while mentally reviewing the personnel files she had studied earlier that week. Charlotte set down her pencil and looked thoughtfully toward the window. "Well, first, he was using the wrong tools for the work he was doing. Daddy taught me about gardening last summer at Amber Hall, and I know you don't use a hedge trimmer on flower beds. But this man was trying to cut the flowers with it, which doesn't make sense." Sarah felt a small chill run down her spine. The palace gardening staff were all highly trained professionals who took pride in their work. The idea of someone misusing tools suggested either extreme incompetence or something more concerning. "Also," Charlotte continued, "he kept looking at the windows of our apartment instead of focusing on his work. Most of the gardeners concentrate on what they're doing and don't pay attention to the building. But this man kept glancing up at our windows, almost like he was studying them." The chill Sarah felt was now accompanied by the familiar tightening in her stomach that every protection officer learned to recognize. It was the feeling that something was not quite right, even if she couldn't yet identify exactly what that something might be. "When did you notice this, Your Royal Highness?" Sarah asked, moving to her secure communication device. "Yesterday afternoon when we returned from school, and again this morning when I was getting ready for breakfast. He was working in the same area both times, which also seemed strange because the other gardeners usually move around to different sections of the grounds throughout the week. Sarah's training kicked into high gear. She had been taught to trust her instincts, and, right now, those instincts were telling her that Princess Charlotte's observations needed immediate investigation. The fact that someone was working in the same location for multiple days, using inappropriate tools, and paying unusual attention to the royal residence was raising every red flag in her security handbook. "Princess Charlotte," Sarah said, her voice remaining calm and steady, "I think your observations are very important, and I need to check on some things. Can you continue with your homework while I make a few telephone calls?" Charlotte nodded seriously. "Should I be worried about something, Miss Sarah?" "Not at all," Sarah replied with a reassuring smile. "You've been very observant, and that's actually helpful. Sometimes fresh eyes notice things that others might miss. You're not in any danger, but it's my job to make sure everything is as it should be." Sarah moved to the secure communications station in the corner of the room. This equipment allowed her to contact the Central Security Office, other protection officers, and emergency services if necessary. She began by calling Chief Inspector David Hughes, who was in charge of the overall security arrangements for the Cambridge family. "Chief Inspector, this is D.S. Mitchell on Princess Charlotte's detail. I need to discuss some observations the princess has made regarding a member of the gardening staff." Hughes was known for his no-nonsense approach to security matters. "What kind of observations, Mitchell?" Sarah relayed Charlotte's comments about the bearded gardener, the inappropriate tools, the repeated presence in the same location, and, most importantly, his apparent interest in the windows of the family's residence. There was a pause on the other end of the line before Hughes responded. "That's concerning on multiple levels. I'm going to check the personnel records for new gardening staff hired in the past 2 weeks. Can you get a more detailed description from the princess?" "Certainly, sir." Sarah returned to where Charlotte was working on her mathematics. "Your Royal Highness, could you tell me more about what this gardener looked like? Any details you remember might be helpful." Charlotte thought for a moment, her young face serious with concentration. His uniform fit him perfectly, which was different from some of the other workers whose clothes sometimes look a bit worn or loose. This detail struck Sarah as particularly significant. Palace staff uniforms were issued based on specific measurements, and a perfectly fitting uniform suggested either very recent employment or something else entirely. "What about his age?" Sarah asked. "Older than you, but younger than Grandmama. Maybe about the same age as Papa, I think. And he had very straight posture, like someone in the military. Uncle Harry stands the same way sometimes." The military bearing was another detail that caught Sarah's attention. While many people could have good posture, the specific way Charlotte described it suggested someone with formal training. "Did you notice anything about his hands or the way he moved?" "His hands looked very clean for someone doing gardening work. And when he walked, he took very even steps, not like someone who was concentrating on plants and soil." Sarah felt her concern deepening with each detail. Charlotte's description was painting a picture of someone who might be playing a role rather than simply doing a job. Her communication device buzzed with an incoming message from Chief Inspector Hughes. The text was brief, but alarming. "No new gardening staff hired in past month. All current staff accounted for and verified. Initiating immediate ground search." Sarah's blood ran cold. If there was no new gardener hired recently, then whoever Charlotte had observed was an unauthorized person on the palace grounds, wearing what appeared to be an authentic uniform, and showing particular interest in the Cambridge family's residence. "Princess Charlotte," Sarah said, keeping her voice calm but firm, "I need you to move away from the windows and sit in the center of the room. We're going to have some additional security officers join us while we sort out a few things." Charlotte immediately recognized the change in Sarah's tone. Despite her young age, she had been raised to understand that security protocols were not optional and that sometimes situations required immediate compliance without questions. "Is this about the gardener?" Charlotte asked as she moved to the center of the room. "Yes, and you did exactly the right thing by telling me about your observations. Your attention to detail may have helped us identify something important." Sarah activated her emergency communication protocol, sending an immediate alert to all palace security stations. Within minutes, she could hear the subtle but unmistakable sounds of additional security personnel taking positions throughout the building. Chief Inspector Hughes arrived at the apartment within 10 minutes, accompanied by 2 additional protection officers. His expression was serious, but controlled as he approached Charlotte, who remained seated calmly in the center of the room. "Your Royal Highness," Hughes said with a respectful nod. "D.S. Mitchell has told me about your observations regarding someone working in the palace gardens. Your attention to detail is quite impressive, and we're going to investigate this matter thoroughly." "Thank you," Charlotte replied politely. "I hope I haven't caused any trouble." "Quite the opposite," Hughes assured her. "You may have prevented trouble." While Hughes spoke with Charlotte, Sarah received another message on her communication device. The grounds search had located evidence of unauthorized entry near the gardening shed, including signs that uniforms and equipment had been accessed without proper authorization. The implications were becoming clearer and more serious by the minute. Someone had gained unauthorized access to palace grounds, acquired authentic-looking gardening uniforms and equipment, and had been conducting what appeared to be surveillance of the royal residence for at least 2 days. Hughes reviewed the message and made a decision that would escalate the situation significantly. "Mitchell, we're implementing enhanced security protocols immediately. I'm calling in additional resources and notifying the relevant authorities." As if to emphasize the gravity of the situation, Hughes stepped away to make a series of telephone calls. Sarah could hear fragments of his conversations, including references to potential security breach, unauthorized surveillance, and immediate investigation. Charlotte, despite being only 8 years old, seemed to understand that her simple observation about a gardener had uncovered something much more significant than anyone had initially realized. "Miss Sarah," Charlotte said quietly, "did I do the right thing by mentioning what I noticed?" "You did absolutely the right thing, Your Royal Highness. Your observation and quick thinking may have prevented something very serious from happening." As the evening progressed, the apartment filled with additional security personnel, communications equipment, and the controlled urgency that characterized a major security incident. Through it all, Princess Charlotte remained remarkably calm, completing her homework while the adults around her worked to understand and address the potential threat she had identified. The young royal's simple comment about a gardener who seemed different had set in motion a chain of events that would soon involve multiple law enforcement agencies, advanced surveillance technology, and a level of security investigation that hadn't been seen at the palace in years. But this was only the beginning. The real investigation was about to start, and what they would discover would prove that Princess Charlotte's innocent observation had potentially saved her family from a carefully planned and dangerous situation. The piercing sound of emergency sirens echoed through the normally peaceful grounds of Kensington Palace at 3:47 a.m. on a cold October morning. What started as a routine security patrol would soon become one of the most significant incidents in recent royal history, all because a young princess had the courage to speak up about something she witnessed that adults had missed entirely. This is not just another royal story. This is about how the innocent observations of a child would expose a dangerous security breach, challenge centuries-old palace protocols, and ultimately save lives. The events that unfolded over the next 5 days would test the very foundations of royal protection, family trust, and the delicate balance between public duty and private safety. Princess Charlotte's quiet voice would soon command the attention of Scotland Yard, MI5, and the highest levels of government. But it all began with what seemed like a simple conversation between a curious 8-year-old and her devoted protection officer during what should have been an ordinary Tuesday evening.